Just because somebody says that they're for you, does that mean that they're for you? And that, my brothers and sisters, is a question I want to pose to each and every one of you out there. And before we get the message started, I just want to give a big thanks to and a quick shout out to all of my new subscribers. I appreciate each and every one of you. And look, I haven't got a chance to reply to all your comments yet, but it was such a blessing to see everybody, a lot of people on the same par, and I really do appreciate your feedback. So, hold tight, I will respond when I get a chance. But United Kingdom. Let's talk about the United Kingdom. For anybody who's a subscriber from the United Kingdom, drop your comments down below. Let me know where you're from. And if you're not from the United Kingdom, don't sweat, because this message is going to be a message for, all of us, and hopefully we can all learn something from this message, right? Now, in the United Kingdom, something caught my eye. I'm sure a lot of you have seen out there Keir Starmer and, the UK Prime Minister, right? And of course we know that they control both left and right. So we see their true intentions now, coming into this year of 2025. And, we can see that the true colors of these politicians, right? They're basically, it's like a flashback from all the way back from COVID. And they're showing their true colors right now.
And that is why today I am announcing this government will make a new free of charge digital ID mandatory for the right to work by the end of this Parliament. Let me spell that out. You will not be able to work in the United Kingdom if you do not have digital ID. It's as simple as that.
I saw an article recently, a couple of days ago from Vietnam, and Vietnam are basically, they're already implementing this digital ID system. And in this article, it said that a lot of people who are actually rejecting it, they're getting locked out of their bank accounts now, They're now facing the consequences of not adhering, to this beast system that floats under the radar. Okay, this beast system that floats under the radar is something that's being implemented because, there's all this terrorism that's coming out. There's all of this immigration that has been waged against us, and because of all of these things, right, they're selling now this guise as, digital ID. It's going to be the savior of the day. Heard it all before, seen it all before, as I'm sure a lot of you out there, have heard these games. You've heard these charades all before, and of course, problem, reaction, solution, right? They give us the problem, right? They want a reaction from the public, and this is what you see out there. You see a lot of people reacting, and basically giving them what they want, because they need to then come up and identify a solution. And Hegelian dialectic, along with the art of manipulation, these are all tricks from Satan, right? He is the prince and the power of the air who basically manipulates and deceives a lot of us into, getting his way. In the book of Isaiah, it says that I will ascend above the clouds. His goal, and of course I'm paraphrasing, but his goal is to ascend above the clouds, have his throne in the sky, right? Digital surveillance. He wants to become like the Most High. That's his ambitions, and he hasn't slowed down one bit, right? We basically see this New World Order is, being waged against us ever since, we can look back from even, back when a lot of these secret societies were created. We can see that goal, that plan, that mission is, slowly coming to this tipping point. And that brings me to my next point. There's a show out here in Australia, and I actually think that this show, I wanted to speak on this quickly, came from the United Kingdom. And there's a show, it's called Tipping Point, right? We're at this period of time in 2025, and they're showing us this show, Tipping Point, and the main star of the show, right, no pun intended there, but if anybody's seen this, let me know down below. The main star of the show is exactly that, right? Isn't it ironic? Isn't it interesting the time that we're in right now, and they come up with a show like that? right? And of course they this is a form of mind control because they put it on before the news, right? They put it on before the news, and therefore everyone's in these heightened emotions. What's happening is, that person is getting all hyped up and they're frantic and they're in that emotional state. They're wondering if this person can win the prize. And then what you see the news come on, right? So while they're in this hyper emotional state, now they're in a state of where the news can present all of this negative news to them, and it's basically a form, it's been out there for a long time now. Anybody who's researched mind control, this is how they get into the alpha and delta states in the brain. It's to create a certain hysteria in how you feel so they can manipulate your emotions. But I don't want to get too off topic, tipping point. And that is exactly where we are now. So this digital ID, what we have to understand, and I know I'm speaking to a lot of people out there who, they understand. I know that a lot of you out there are aware of the agenda, you're aware of the plan, and you know what's coming. But I pray that this message can reach somebody out there who's, on the fence about this whole digital ID. And, maybe your pastor, maybe somebody has pointed it out and they've said, look, it's not the mark of the beast. Don't worry about it. Well, I'm here to tell you today that, if you're sitting on the fence, this is something that you can't compromise with. All right? This is something that, has serious spiritual consequences if you adhere to this upcoming beast system. And the beginning of that implementation of the beast system, that is this digital ID. And so what's really important right now is to understand what's really going on and happening on this world stage. And I asked a question at the beginning of the video. Just because somebody says that they're for you, does that mean that they're for you? I've seen recently, I think it was a YouTube video of this gentleman from the United Kingdom where this digital ID is being implemented. His name is Nigel Farage.
So the Prime Minister says we must have digital ID. That's the way we'll stop illegal immigration. Well, think about it. Germany has ID cards, strict ID and checks. It's made no difference at all in Germany, and nor will it here. All that digital ID will be is a means of controlling the population, of telling us what we can and can't do, of fining the innocent. And didn't we see it all when we had the pandemic, when you had to have vaccine ID to travel, to do various things? Did that stop the COVID pandemic spreading? Did it hell? All it did was put cost and inconvenience on everybody else. I also worry about massive data banks being held by the government, being hacked by foreign governments, by private companies, by criminals. I do not see a single benefit to the government having digital ID other than them controlling what we do, what we spend, and where we go. And we, in Reform, are wholly opposed to it in every single way.
Nigel Farage or Nigel Mirage? That's what I'd like to know. Because you see this politician getting propped up who's, tickling your ears, he's saying everything that you want to hear, right? Just like Donald Trump. As soon as I saw this, it literally reminded me of Donald Trump. He's telling you everything you want to hear. He's tickling your ears. And brothers and sisters, we got to get used to having our ears tickled, right? This is how Satan operates. He operates through the art of manipulation. He operates through the art of deception. He does this because, if he tickles our ears and tells us everything that we want to hear, right, that allows him to then, come into the picture and think, oh, well, I'm going to, tell them what they want to hear. And what happens down the pipeline? Down the pipeline, this person that you had all this faith, all this trust in, this person is now selling you something that is far more nefarious than the original problem, right? So because that person has now gained your trust, you now trust him with everything. You now trust in everything that he says. And that's why it says in the book of Jeremiah, cursed is he that trusteth in man. Okay, so when we put our faith and trust into this world system, right, this political game of charades, right? And let's take it back a step, right? Let's take it back a step and, let's look at politics in the first place. Politicians don't just, one day they feel like becoming a politician and, they walk over to the news agency, buy a lottery ticket, right? They're sitting there waiting for a week, they write down their numbers and then boom, all of a sudden you become a politician. It doesn't just work like that. It's not luck of the draw. And, I'm sure a lot of you out there know that that's just not how it works, okay? They can try and manipulate us all they want, but people, like many of you out there who have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, you can see past this deception that they're trying to, give us, Politicians, at the end of the day, we have to keep in mind that they're selected. Right? Politicians aren't elected. That's not the way it works. If you have somebody who comes onto the world stage, then you better understand that that person, right, that they're propping up, doesn't matter how much they're talking about the government's controlling you, doesn't matter how much they're, tickling your ears, telling you all the things that you want to hear. Doesn't matter what they say, always trust a person's actions rather than their words. Just because they're telling you everything you want to hear, does that mean that they're for you, right? Donald Trump was giving this speech of a lifetime, before he came into power. And look what happened that first day he came into power. He had, all of these big CEOs from these major tech companies, right, sitting by his side, right, at his speech. If that's not a dead giveaway of somebody who's completely compromised and under control, then I don't know what is. To become a politician in the first place, you have to become compromised to a certain extent, whether it's through blackmail. You can't be in a place or situation where you are a threat to their world system and how their system operates. So you have to be compromised in the first place to become, and I'm obviously talking about high level politics, your prime ministers, they are all adhering to this beast system. So anybody who says that they're for you, and they're on this world stage, this Luciferian system that we see out there, because this system is not of the Most High, then you can't trust anybody that comes on the world stage. Anybody. And that's why, if we put our faith and trust in man over the Most High, this is what will happen. What will happen is we will be let off the cliff. And who remembers that good old ideology in regards to, the sheep? All of these sheep are walking off the cliff. And there's that one sheep that's questioning, hey, I think we're going the wrong way. We need to go back right now and we need to walk the other way. And all of the sheep aren't listening to that one sheep that can actually see through the lies, see through the deception, because that one sheep is relying on the Holy Spirit for that wisdom, that guidance, that understanding. That one sheep is not being naive and he's not listening to, the news, the propaganda that's being waged against him. That brother or sister now, they're turning their back and they're walking away from this system. And, my brothers and sisters, what we have to do right now is we have to see all of these things now and begin to slowly retract, right? I'm talking about technology. I'm talking about everything, retract from all of this technology that they're trying to wage against us. They're listening to everything we say on our phones, on, any of these devices. It'd be pretty common sense right now to not have one of these Alexa devices, these iPads right in your home where they're listening to everything that you say, everything that you hear. Get rid of the smartphone. It'd be a good idea to start there. Start maybe at a small level, right? Start at a small level and slowly begin to retract. What are some things that you have done to retract from this beast system? What are some things that you have done to start minimizing and start saying no? But nonetheless, I don't want to get too off topic. If you're somebody who's watched my recent, previous videos, if you're somebody who adheres to the fact of, you've done your research and, shockingly enough, actually seems like a lot of what we've been told in these modern day churches where they're teaching us about, eschatology. These churches may not be teaching the correct timelines that we've been given. And so I want to really jump to this point because a lot of people may think that contextually, this is actually the mark of the beast. And especially when we're talking about the book of Revelation, anybody who's done their homework and been able to correlate what's happened in 70 AD with the Great Tribulation, things like the Antichrist, the mark of the beast, you will know that they're simply not, what we're being told out there. And so basically, what I'm trying to say is, from a context point of view, how we look at things is very, very important. And, looking at this digital ID system, even though it may not be contextually speaking the mark of the beast, that was written in the Bible, what we can understand right now is that Satan is implementing and using the book of Revelation to basically use that as an excuse to bring forth his one world order. This is personally just what I've come to realize. And so what's important to understand is that just because this may not be the mark of the beast, does that mean that we can, just accept everything that's coming our way? Does that mean that we can just accept, this new world system, this implementation of this new digital ID? Well, the answer to that is absolutely and unequivocally no. We cannot accept this upcoming system. We cannot adhere to this upcoming digital ID, okay? Because it is without a shadow of the doubt, it is the implementation of the New World Order. And we, if we adhere to this, right, this has serious spiritual consequences, right? We cannot adhere to this upcoming beast system. It is a mark of the beast in speaking where this is a part of the beast system that crosses the line. We all live in society. Today we have a driver's license, right? We have, a bank card, bank accounts, phones, this, that. But we have to draw our line in the sand somewhere, right? And this system that's being implemented and put into place, we have to understand that this system, at the end of the day, is still the beast system. And there is absolutely no compromise in this beast system that's coming. Right? If you have a pastor, if you have you have preachers out there that are telling you to adhere to this beast system and say, oh, well, don't worry about the digital ID, the mark of the beast is coming, right? You need to run for the hills. You need to run for the hills and not look back. Right? Because that pastor, that preacher there, they're adhering to the umbrella structure of organized religion that we see out there. And organized religion, if they fall under the 50, I know the American, churches fall under the 501c3, right? And I'm not sure with the Australian, same as the UK, all of these westernized countries, they all adhere to this 501c3 system. I think they're all called different, systems in different countries. But nonetheless, they all adhere to this pyramidical structure in which they are given salaries, they are given a place on this world stage, so long as you adhere to their doctrine that they give you, which means that they are giving you a certain eschatological timeline with that doctrine, but nonetheless, that's for a different video. And most high willing, look, I'll speak about this, mark of the beast in a future video, but we cannot compromise. We have to say no, right? We cannot comply. Because this digital ID, I'm sure for many of you out there who might know what this is, we have our social credit score system, that's all going to be in one place. And if you've got Facebook right now, you go to your local shopping centers, you will see some sort of system where you can rate the customer service, right? If you use Facebook, you can actually rate that customer service that you see, right? This is all being implemented right now to get you accustomed and desensitized to this upcoming social credit score, right? So social credit score, you're going to have your carbon footprint, they're waging war against us breathing oxygen, right? That's what we have to realize out there. They want to get to net zero, which means that, everything that we're breathing, right, the air that we breathe, we're basically emitting carbon now. You know, we are becoming a problem in this society because we're emitting carbon, right? And they want to get to carbon zero. Well, hey, brothers and sisters, you do the math. What do you think they mean when they say that? Drop your comments down below. What do you think that they mean when they say that? They want to get to net zero. So all of these things, you know, vaccine requirements, social credit, it's going to be basically all in one. This is what the digital ID is, you know. Everything linked up to, you know, our footprint. It's going to be a digital footprint. And this is where we have to draw our line in the sand and say no. Okay, and you have these people out here like, you know, this gentleman named Nigel Farage. You know, in the UK, well, everybody's disagreeing with Keir Starmer now. And, you know, everybody can see through the charades now. People starting to see that these politicians are all just full of it, right? So here we have somebody like that plays the character as the charismatic leader, right? In the Illuminati card deck. In America, we have Donald Trump. And in the UK now, it looks like we have this gentleman named Nigel Farage. And, you know, basically, this person gets propped up on this world stage to make you think that they're for you, right? But they are not for you, right? Just because they're tickling your ears, telling us everything that we want to hear, doesn't mean that they're for us. They still play a part on this Luciferian world stage, right? And, you know, it's fascinating because, you know, they really do play on people's emotions, right? And I know there's many of you out there who can see through the charades. There's many of you out there I'm talking to, you know what the deal is and you know what their plan is and what's coming, right? So the people out there who may be sitting on the fence, that may be getting their ears tickled, right, by the prince and the power of the air, because we know that he operates through the art of deception. He operates through the art of manipulation. And at the end of the day, as long as he has you in this beast system, as long as he has you on this world stage, then at the end of the day, he has you, and that's all that matters. In the book of Corinthians, it says, be not ignorant of Satan's devices. You know, how many of you out there have heard of that one? And even though Paul writ that to the church of Corinth, we can still apply that to today. I mean, how many devices out there does Satan have where he can trick, manipulate us and deceive us, right? And the iPhone being one of them. How many of us are guilty for, you know, having a smartphone, having a phone all these years that we just, you know, we were just playing a part and getting distracted, getting deceived, you know? Letting him deceive us any which way. I mean, we've all been guilty. We all live in this society, you know? But, you know, be not ignorant of his devices. Understand, and, you know, it's really up to us to be led by the Holy Spirit. It's up to us to have that, you know, wisdom, knowledge, and understanding at the end of the day, so we are not deceived and we can navigate through these deceptions that we're in right now. The Holy Spirit will give you the wisdom and the discernment and the understanding for the time that we're in. And, you know, that is what's most important to navigate through this season of deception. That's been a season of deception beyond belief. You know, he is deceiving the nations like we have never seen, right? And I can't speak, obviously I wasn't alive hundreds of years ago, right? You know, physically speaking. But, you know, it doesn't take a genius to figure out how much deception is being waged against us right now in this time. So, you know, at the end of the day, you know, we can't be ignorant to Satan's devices. Cursed is he that puts all of his faith and trust in man instead of the Most High. You know, because the Most High is going to give us, you know, through his Spirit, you know, the ability to see through these things. And isn't it crazy, you know, how many of you have seen that Black Mirror episode called Nosedive? I remember years and years ago, a friend invited me over to his house, and he knows that I'm interested in this stuff. I reckon when it first came out, such a long time ago, but it's crazy because I actually remember that day like it was yesterday. Right, and you're watching this, and I remember watching it thinking, that is just so far from what we live in right now. And we are seeing all of that now change, and we are at the tipping point, like I said, that show that you know, I was telling you about tipping point. We're at the tipping point right now in the year of 2025, right? The year of the snake, right? Everything had to be laid. All of the groundwork had to be laid in 2025 to be ready to implement all of these catastrophic events, right? And we know that the devil operates through predictive programming, through telling us all these things via lesson magic. He had to tell us all of these things for all of these years. And we probably didn't actually realize at the time that this was all for the days ahead, right? Who remembers watching movies like 2012, right? 2012, Deep Impact. So many of them, I can't name them off the top of my head, but you know, to actually think that they were actually programming us back at that time when we were watching them for entertainment, you know, like when we were in our adolescence. How crazy it is to actually look back now and think, you know, this is here. Like, we're here right now. We're at the tipping point. Like I said, 2025 was the year that they had to lay all of that foundation. They had to pass all of these laws. They had to implement all of these, you know, laws and things of that nature, just so that they can implement and do this and play out, you know, all of these things on the world stage that are to come. So, moral of the story. Just because somebody says that they're for you doesn't mean that they're for you. Okay? And you cannot compromise saying yes and adhering to this digital ID. Let's go back to, you know, at the end of the day, when the lights go out and when they decide to implement these scenarios that, you know, we're seeing all of these movies, you know, to achieve and implement what they want to implement, are you in a position to provide, you know, for your family? Do you have enough water to survive? You know, these are the questions we need to be asking ourselves right now and preparing for what's coming. You know, it says that a prudent man foreseeth evil and hides himself. It says that in the book of Proverbs. So this time, you know, we need to be walking in wisdom and thinking about, you know, the best way to protect and provide for our families, you know, and look at things as if they are, you know, not going to be this way for much longer. And before we part ways today, my brothers and sisters, I wanted to leave you with this one thing. Albert Pike, who was the most notable Freemason all throughout history, he said that when the masses need a hero, we will supply them with that hero. And basically what that means is whenever they need someone on the world stage to play a certain role and act as in, you know, they're in opposition, we will supply the masses with that person. Do not be deceived. And I love each and every one of you, and I'll see you in the next video.